Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into a classic? We're talking Marty from 1955. On the surface, it seems like just a romantic comedy about a Bronx butcher, trying to find love. But there's so much more going on beneath the surface, trust me.
It really captures that feeling of post-war America, all those traditional values, especially around marriage, but also that undercurrent of anxiety, like you're being left behind if you don't follow the script.
Yeah, totally. And poor Marty, he's dealing with that big time, like even with family and friends.
Yeah.
He's so lonely, almost like he's invisible, reduced to just the unmarried son.
He really is unseen, not just by his family, though they do mean well, but by society in general. It's like his worth is all tied up in whether he's married or not, which, I think a lot of people can relate to even today.
I hear that. It's that pressure to conform, right?
Yeah.
Like you should be at a certain point in life, whether you are or not.
Yeah.
And that's Marty's life every single day. It's not just him either. There's Angie, his friend, who puts on this whole act.
Angie. He's a great example of what we call stunted growth. He's basically clinging to being young to avoid adult stuff.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he's terrified of commitment, and it comes out as this almost aggressive masculinity, which, says a lot about what men were expected to be back then.
Yeah, makes you wonder if Angie's just as lonely as Marty, really. Just dealing with it in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And speaking of pressure, there's that phrase that just hangs over the whole film. You ought to be ashamed.
It's everywhere. Really shows how ingrained that idea was. Marriage equaled success, especially for men. So not being married meant you were failing somehow.
Right.
And the film is really critiquing that, showing how it dehumanizes people.
Totally. It's like they're not even seen as people anymore, just their marital status. And you see that visually, too, especially in those dance hall scenes.
Absolutely. The dance hall is more than just a place to dance. It's this crazy, almost predatory environment. Everyone's being judged, sized up. It becomes a symbol for how desperate and transactional finding a partner was back then.
Wow, yeah, you're right. It's like they're not even looking for connection, just checking off a box. And then there's Clara. She was like a breath of fresh air in this whole stifling atmosphere.
She's the outsider, doesn't fit the mold at all, and she gets pushed aside for being smart and independent. Not what a woman was supposed to be,
Right.
But it's that outsider status that lets her see Marty for who he is, someone worthy of love and connection.
It's so important because he doesn't see it himself. He's bought into all that societal stuff.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's not good enough because he's not married.
Exactly. Remember when he says, I don't want to get married just to get married? It shows how much he wants something real, to break free from all those expectations.
Yeah.
And his connection with Clara is so powerful because it challenges all those norms. They connect on a much deeper level.
It's like they finally see each other, not as labels, but as, people. And this whole idea of seeing beyond appearances, of really looking deeper. You see it so beautifully in all the symbolism in the film, like the butcher shop, for example. It's more than just where Marty works, right?
Oh, definitely. It's this feeling of being trapped. Notice how they use tight shots and shadows in those scenes. It's claustrophobic, like he's being boxed in. The butcher shop becomes a visual metaphor for all that pressure he's under.
I totally felt that watching it. Like he's on this conveyor belt of expectations, and there's no getting off. And then there's the dance hall. We talked about it before. But it's not just about being superficial, is it? It's also this desperate search for validation.
Exactly. It's a microcosm of society's obsession with marriage, this chaotic space where everyone's trying to find a partner, not even necessarily for love, but for social acceptance.
Like they're performing for each other.
Yeah.
Trying to fit into these roles they're supposed to play.
Yeah.
And then there's the telephone. Such a simple thing, but it means so much in this film.
Oh, it's huge. The telephone becomes this symbol of Marty's agency, his ability to break free from everything pushing on him.
Okay.
When he finally picks up the phone to call Clara, it's this moment of defiance. He's choosing connection, realness, over what society expects.
He's finding his voice.
Exactly.
Taking control of his own story. And that brings us to Marty's whole journey of self-acceptance. It's not like a sudden change, but more this gradual thing, shedding all that self-doubt.
He starts off with all that self-deprecating humor, it's like a defense mechanism, a way to hide his insecurities, deflect judgment before it happens.
Right.
But as he connects with Clara, he starts to see himself differently.
And she's so important in that process. It's not that she tells him he's worthy. It's that she really sees him for who he is, and that helps him see himself more clearly.
Her empathy is powerful. Remember that line, I'm a little man, but I don't want to hurt nobody. So much shame there, like he believes he's not enough.
It's heartbreaking.
And then Clara says, you're a good man. It's simple, but it cuts through all the noise, all the messages he's been getting. It reminds him that he has worth.
It's a message we all need to hear, right? That our worth comes from inside us, not from what other people think.
Absolutely. And while this is all very personal for Marty, it also reflects what was going on in post-war America, the Bronx, with its tight community and old-school values. It represents a society that's struggling with change.
It's like the world is changing, but those old expectations just won't let go.
Exactly. The film is critiquing the American dream, in a way, suggesting that real fulfillment comes from finding your own path, not conforming.
And that's something we can all relate to today, I think. Maybe we're not in the 1950s anymore. But that pressure to conform, to feel like you're falling behind, it's almost universal.
And there are those economic anxieties, too. Marty trying to support his mother, Clara facing dismissal because she's a woman. These subtle reminders of how much society impacts our well-being.
It's like those anxieties just seep into everything. And speaking of anxiety, we can't forget Marty's mother, Mrs. Piletti. She's such a fascinating character because she represents this generational trauma.
Oh, absolutely. Her fear of being alone, her worries about getting older, they all come from her own life, a life full of loss and uncertainty. And her pushing Marty to get married, it might seem overbearing, but it comes from a place of deep fear.
She's trying to protect him
from
the pain she's experienced, but she ends up passing those same anxieties on to him.
It shows how these pressures can get passed down through generations, how hard it can be to break those cycles.
Makes you think about how those cycles can be so hard to break. But ultimately, Marty has this message of hope, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It reminds us that real happiness comes from, defying those expectations and embracing who you are, having the courage to say, this is me and I deserve love and acceptance, no matter what society says.
It's such a powerful message, especially today, when everyone's so focused on appearances. Do you think that's why Marty still resonates with people, even after all these years?
Absolutely. Loneliness, societal pressure, searching for real connection, those are timeless themes. And the film doesn't sugarcoat anything. It shows the messy parts of life, the struggles, the doubts. That honesty makes it so relatable.
I think you're right. It's not just a feel-good movie. It's about what it means to be human, the ups and downs. It makes you feel like you're not alone in all of it.
And it reminds us that we have the power to choose our own path, to step outside of those boxes and create a life that's true to ourselves. It's not always easy, but Marty shows us that it's possible.
It really does give you a lot to think about. Like, what if Marty was set in today's world? What kind of pressures would he be dealing with? What would be his version of the dance hall?
Ooh, that's a great question. Would it be the pressure to be successful? Or maybe all the comparing and competing we see on social media? Those themes are so universal that they could definitely be updated for today.
You're right. We're not in the 1950s Bronx anymore. But that pressure to conform, to fit in, to achieve some arbitrary definition of success, I think we all deal with that in some way.
For sure. And Marty reminds us that real happiness comes from inside. It's about accepting yourself, flaws and all, and connecting with people on a deeper level.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I know I'm going to watch Marty again with a whole new perspective. It's amazing how these seemingly simple stories can have such profound truths about ourselves and the world we live in.
I agree. There's always something new to discover in those classic films, especially when you look at them through the lens of your own experiences.
So if you haven't seen Marty, I highly recommend it. And if you have, maybe it's time for a rewatch. You might be surprised by how much it speaks to you, even after all this time. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring those stories that shape us. Makes you think, how those expectations, how we just keep passing them down. But Marty, though, it does give you hope, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it shows us that real happiness comes from, well, kind of going against the grain, like embracing who you really are.
Yeah, exactly.
Having the guts to, hey, this is me, take it or leave it. Like, you deserve love and acceptance, period. It doesn't matter what anyone else says.
It's a powerful message, especially now when it feels like everyone's so worried about, appearances and fitting in and all that.
Yeah.
Why do you think Marty still connects with people after all these years?
Well, it's those themes, right? Feeling lonely, that pressure from society, trying to find a real connection with someone. Those things, those never really go away, do they?
Not really, no.
And the film, it's honest. It shows those messy parts of life, the struggles we all go through. I think that's what makes it so relatable.
You hit the nail on the head. It's not just a feel-good movie. It's real. It's about what it means to be human, with all the good and the bad.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we have a choice. We don't have to fit in those little boxes people try to put us in. We can make our own lives that are true to ourselves.
We can. It might be tough.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But Marty shows us it's possible. It makes you wonder, though, what if Marty was set today? What would he be up against? What would be his, modern-day dance hall?
Ooh, now that's an interesting thought. Would it be all about, being super successful? Or maybe those social media comparisons, always trying to keep up with everyone else. It's funny because those themes in the movie, they could fit right in today, couldn't they?
Absolutely. Maybe we're not in the Bronx in the 50s anymore, but those pressures, they're still there, trying to conform, feeling like you're not good enough, chasing after some idea of success that, well, it might not even be what you want.
So true. But that's what Marty reminds us, that real happiness comes from within, accepting yourself, warts and all, finding those deep connections with people.
You said it perfectly. I don't know about you, but I'm going to watch Marty again with fresh eyes. It's amazing how these simple stories can have so much depth to them, so much to say about us and the world.
I'm right there with you. There's always something new to see in those classic films, especially when you look at them through your own experiences.
Exactly. So if you haven't seen Marty, do yourself a favor and check it out. And if you have, well, maybe it's time for another watch. You might be surprised at how much it still resonates with you, even after all these years. Until next time, keep diving deep into those stories that make us who we are.